Welcome back to the most bizarre show on the internet. I am the one that some people refer to as Shane Squatch.
You got squatched.
What the hell is even that?
Apparently nothing good. I don't take being squatched as anything positive, but that's just my opinion. And alongside me, I have the one, the only, the big bad Boudette himself, Sir Oren Felix.
Excuse me. I apologize. We have a family audience. That was wrong, and I won't do it again.
Somebody please think of the children.
Considering that this one's more of a Halloween episode, I figured that you got rejected today on your moans. I'm sorry, my friend. You get Alex Jones screaming at everybody saying this is a family show instead. So,
yeah, I was wondering where we were going with that. We started off pretty risque, but then you brought it back around. So, yeah, this is a family show. As all of our longtime listeners will know, we don't ever talk about anything crude or crass or space turds or anything like that. So
we keep that for the After Dark show.
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, space turds and the complaint we got about that kind of leads into some news and updates, does it not?
Oh, yeah. So we have another comment on Spotify speaking about our humor, of course. So we got to read this one, of course, considering the last one that said that we are not humorous at all. You know, we're absolute
absolutely.
Garbage.
Yes.
But today's comment says, "You clowns think you're funny? Well, so do I. Keep it up." So thank you, Kelly. Longtime listener, Kelly. He's been around since the very beginning of the show for this one and for inquiries. So he's one of those people kind of like Blood Chugger. Every once in a while, you got to give him a big shout out. And also kind of cool, about a year ago, he was sending me a bunch of updated pictures where he traveled with his grandpa to go see Area 51 and all the weird alien high strangeness stuff over there. So also pretty cool, and got to give him a shout out for all the cool pictures he sent me from that one.
Very cool. Thank you, Kelly, for the support and the shout out and for being a friend of the show. We need all the friends we can get. So.
Not beating up on us too much. But it was really funny. I didn't read who it was from at first. So when I first started reading the first line, I was like, oh, God, here comes another one. And then I realized it was from Kelly, and the wrap-up kind of made it worth it. So,
well, hey, like we said, 1-star reviews and 5 stars. I think that counts as a 5-star. So good enough for me.
Always good enough for me. Thank you again, Kelly. And moving into the more pressing matters, of course, I put out a post on TikTok trying to get people to call in for it. And hopefully we get some. It hasn't hit October yet, so I'm not really expecting too much until October. But hopefully we can at least get 10 of them. We want to put together our Halloween special. And for the Halloween special, we're going to be going over some cool Halloween stories. And part of that, of course, is that we would love to have some of your guys' weird encounters, whether it's cryptid, extraterrestrial, paranormal, Ouija board experiences, anything weird like that. We would love to include it on the Halloween special. So if anybody would like to be a part of that, you guys can call into our hotline, leave your encounter over there as a voicemail. And of course, I will double check with you and make sure it's okay. We use it for the show. And as I've mentioned on the last few shows, if anybody would like to remain anonymous, we can definitely do that. You guys can even type it out and text it to me and I can read it on the show. But if you guys send it in and you guys want your voice changed, we can do that. But specifically, we will only do robot Alex Jones. So that's what you guys get.
Scary robot voices only.
And I don't know if I said the number, so just in case I didn't, which I don't think I did, but if not, I'll say it twice. The number, again, is 313-364-1551, and you guys can also catch it down in the show notes.
And our next episode of Bizarre Inquiries, our YouTube live show, is going to be Thursday, October the 2nd. It's going to be roughly 7:15 Eastern Time on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube channel. So you guys be sure to submit questions, articles, videos, anything like that you want us to inquire about. We're kind of going for a Halloween theme for this month's episode. So anything in that vein that you guys want us to talk about, shoot that our way, and also be sure to join us in the chat during the episode.
And we are planning on hopefully keeping up with Halloween for the entire month. We're recording this, I believe, the last week of September, but this will be the first week of October. So this is the start of our Halloween specials today. So that's fun and exciting, I guess.
Yes.
But if anybody would like to contact us to possibly be a guest on the show, share their experiences or encounters, or for any other reason you guys might want to contact us, you guys can email us at bizarreencounters@outlook.com. Or you guys can always, again, call or text that hotline. And I'm going to say it for a second, possibly even third time. That number is 313-364-1551. So again, make sure you guys get those call-ins before the Halloween special, because that will be happening on, if I'm not mistaken, what is that, October 29th? So the day before Halloween. So it'll work out perfect.
And if you guys would like to support the show, Shane, tell them how they can do that.
First and foremost, you guys can go and check out our awesome Patreon for Bizarre Reality Media. You get this show and you get Inquiries of Our Reality and some additional stuff from Bizarre Inquiries. But we got 2 tiers over there for you, ad-free / early access and full access. So if you guys might be interested in going and checking those out, there is a 7-day free trial so you guys can see what it's all about.
And you guys can also check out the Bizarre Reality merch store with t-shirts starting at the oddly specific and astronomically low price of just $15.68 plus shipping.
And if you guys happen to be big Bizarre Encounter fans, which of course you're here, so hopefully you are to some extent, you guys can even scoop this lovely Bizarre Encounters hat that I'm wearing today for all the visual listeners. But I know times can be tough out there, so if you guys might be interested in supporting the show in some other ways,
you can leave a review.
You guys can follow the show on Instagram and or Facebook.
You can like, share, and subscribe and do all the internet stuff.
And you guys can always catch live shows on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube and Twitch channels.
And as always, all the shit we've mentioned is in the link tree in the show description.
And getting into today's episode, as I mentioned, it is the first start of our Halloween series as we're slowly building up to Halloween. And if I'm not mistaken, I think today we might be getting into some ghosty stuff, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, Oren?
That is true.
Holy shit!
That's about to be me as soon as the show starts up. I'm really scared. I'm a scared Oren. What are we getting into today?
Okay, so like you said, Shane, this is going to kind of ease us into a spooky season here. I'm going to tell a ghost story, and I haven't done anything from North Carolina in a while, so I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. So unless you got anything else, we will start talking about Lydia, the hitchhiking ghost.
Let's hop right in, man. I'm excited for this one.
All right. So
it's been a while since we've touched paranormal, just to throw that one in there. We've been doing really, really hard on aliens and cryptids for a while, even more so aliens lately. So it's been a hot minute since we've touched anything paranormal.
Well, and it's the season for it, so we might as well, right?
Yeah, guys, we do have some factions of listeners that their personal favorite is paranormal. So every once in a while, we got to throw one in.
Well, this is for you guys. So, all right. Anyway, so the legend of Lydia, the hitchhiking ghost, is arguably like the most famous and well-known ghost story in North Carolina folklore. And the legend dates back like at least to the 1920s. And it originated in a small town called Jamestown, North Carolina. And this is located in Guilford County, so kind of near the cities of Greensboro and High Point for anybody that's familiar with that area. And the legend goes a little something like this. So on a foggy and rainy night in the spring of 1923, a young woman named Lydia was attending a school dance with her boyfriend. And after they danced and socialized like late into the night, Lydia suddenly realized that it was almost her curfew. So her and her boyfriend suddenly left the dance, and they were like tearing down this narrow, curvy section of a road called High Point Road. Well, as they were driving, her boyfriend lost control of the vehicle, and it skidded. Yep. And it skidded off the road and crashed into a Southern Railroad underpass bridge. And allegedly, this instantly killed Lydia's boyfriend, but she was somehow able to like drag herself back to the side of the road. However, none of the passing cars would stop and help Lydia, and she died there lying next to the side of the road by the bridge.
That's a very traumatic story. I feel like a lot of these ghost stories are pretty brutal. Like this woman just dragged herself like half dead and mangled on the side of the road and nobody would stop and help. Like these stories are so decrepit, man.
Well, it's like the 1920s, so you know they weren't wearing seatbelts.
Dude, in the 1920s, I thought back in those days, people actually got out and helped people. It's not 2025 where you see somebody half bloody on the side of the road and you assume that somebody's going to try to jump you. Like back then, people helped people. Like what happened?
Well, that's going to play into some other versions of the story we're going to talk about later.
Well, I'm excited to get into it, to hear all the different variations of the story. Because I'm assuming like a lot of these ghost stories that are very localized, there's always these different variations of them, but the common motif stays the same, but like the events leading up are always different and they get more brutal as time goes on.
Well, we'll just have to see. So you want to do an ad break here?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
About 10 minutes in, that's about perfect.
That's kind of what I figured. I tried to front load this one. So, all right. You good?
Yep.
All right. So in another version of the legend, Lydia was driving home to High Point after attending a dance in Raleigh, which is, of course, where I live for all of our longtime listeners. And her car broke down. And fearing that her mother would be worried about her, she left her car on the side of the road and started walking home. Well, according to this version of the legend, she was struck and killed by a passing driver, and her like kind of restless spirit has been trying to return home ever since. Some of the other details. Okay. Some of the other details that vary depending on which version of the legend you hear include, like in some versions, Lydia appears only on the anniversary of her death. In other versions, she can appear on like any cold and rainy night. In some versions of the story, she was attending a New Year's Eve party instead of like a school or community dance. In some versions, it says that her car like crashed into another car rather than into the bridge, and that both Lydia and her boyfriend instantly were killed. In some versions, she's covered in blood, which might play into a story we're going to talk about later. And in other versions, she appears like mostly unharmed. And this is kind of a small detail, but I figured I'd throw it in. Like the street address also changes wildly depending on which version of the story, if it's mentioned at all. In some versions, it's Johnson or Woodleaf or Maple or Walnut or even Centennial streets.
Just out of curiosity, and you might bring it up farther in the notes, with a lot of these stories, of course, there's like a route to them. Were you able to find any like route to this one to see like kind of where it all?
We're going to get into a lot of that stuff in theories. So all of that kind of stuff I kind of put toward the back of the episode.
I always expect it with any of these local ghost stories. There's always some root of it, and then there's
always
like
a nugget of truth in anything, right? All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the actual sightings of Lydia. Like this was kind of just like the broad strokes and the details of the legend. But what was
Sorry,
that?
I had to throw some Scooby-Doo in.
Okay, well, you know I love Scooby-Doo.
It's the ghost.
Anyway, so sightings of Lydia have been reported across several decades. And one of the most famous reports happened sometime in the early 1950s. And a man named Burke Hardison was driving through Jamestown after visiting friends in Raleigh. And it was a rainy night, of course. And when he was going near the underpass bridge, he noticed a young woman in a white dress standing on the side of the road.
That was the noise she was making.
That's probably exactly what it did.
On the side of the road.
So he pulled over and was, going to offer this young woman a ride. And she got in the car, but she kind of seemed scared and remained largely silent as they drove toward High Point. Hardison kept trying to make conversation with her, but all the young woman kept saying was that she needed to get home before her mother started to worry about her. So also kind of similar to one of the legends we talked about earlier. So finally, as they were driving, this young woman pointed out a house and said that that was where she lived. So Hardison pulled into the driveway and he got out of the car to open the car door for the young woman. But by the time he made it around to the other side of the car, she had mysteriously vanished. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, and that's probably the noise she made.
No, she made this noise.
Okay. So anyway, Hardison approached the house and knocked on the door. And an old woman answered the door. And he went on to kind of explain what had just happened to him in this freaky encounter and disappearance that he experienced. And the old woman told him that this young woman was actually the ghost of her daughter, Lydia, who had died in a car accident some 30 years earlier. So the old woman also said that throughout the years, countless other people had encountered Lydia and tried to bring her back home. So this is something...
I'm so fucking scared right now.
Okay.
That's what he said to the lady when she said, "My daughter's dead." What do you mean?
Pretty much. So yeah, the old woman basically said that this is something that happened routinely throughout the years. So moving on to another story.
By the way, just to throw this one in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
This story, is this at least from your research, is this another one of those folklore stories with the lady answering the door? Or did you find anything that was solid about this woman actually answering the door to bring some validity into the fact that there might be an apparition in the area?
Nothing too much about the lady who answers the door. That is a common motif in some of the later sightings and the retellings. But it's not really a big aspect of the story that I came across.
So it's kind of just probably part of the folklore that kind of
Yeah, just kind of like a minor detail in the story.
Try to make it sound more real, because obviously a lot of these stories, the main reason they get tossed around is a lot of teenagers talking about scary spots to go to, all this type of stuff. So of course the story's going to change as time goes on, because people
they're
are going to
urban
try
legends,
to make it
basically.
more. Yeah, exactly. They're going to try to add more validity to it by adding these little minor details, like, oh, there was the ghost woman, and now there's a woman that answers the door that says that was her daughter. Like, just another step in trying to make it sound more realistic.
No, so I think supposedly, quote unquote, like the old woman who answers the door is like a real person. She's not like a ghost or anything.
Double the story up at a certain point. Maybe she does turn into a ghost.
Double the ghosts.
You're dealing with double ghosts here now.
It's like ghost on ghost inception.
Ghostception. There you go. Ghost squared.
All right, so we're going to move on to our next account. And this one happened in 1966. So a man named Frank Fay was driving from Greensboro to High Point with his wife and another couple. And as they approached the underpass bridge on High Point Road, the couple saw a young woman in a white dress attempting to flag down the car in front of them. Well, the car in front of them didn't stop, but Frank Fay slowed down because he was like intending to stop and give this young woman a ride.
At least somebody has some courtesy back then. It took the 60s for people to have some courtesy, apparently.
So by the time they arrived at the bridge where the young woman was standing, she again had mysteriously vanished. So Frank was like startled by this disappearance, and he asked his wife and the other couple if they had seen this apparition, young woman, whatever you want to call it, and they confirmed that they did. So, take all these with a grain of salt, but apparently 4 people could corroborate this encounter or sighting or experience, whatever you want to call it.
See, for me at least, with a lot of these urban legends, I don't think that the expansion of the urban legend necessarily takes away from the root of whatever it was. That being said, like, if there is a ghost in an area, of course, there's going to be a million different stories for it. So if it makes sense what I'm trying to say, like, the more that gets added to a ghost story doesn't take away validity to me. It kind of just either one shows that there is maybe something in the area that's unexplained, or on the other side, maybe it is a bunch of buildup. But if you can find like a root to these things and people are seeing ghosts, I mean, it is going to be expected. People are going to make up their own variations of these ghost stories. Like, it doesn't take away the validity to me. It still might mean that there's something in the area. You just kind of have to pay attention to this specific area where people are saying these sightings. Because if it's all over town, of course, people are just kind of throwing their 2 cents in. But if people are always reporting seeing something weird in one spot, maybe there is something there. And again, it's just a matter of retelling stories a million times, but maybe there is still something there.
Yeah, I mean, like we talk about in cryptid sightings and stories, or even like Native American folklore. Like, how many times on the show have we said in all these type of high strangeness encounters or stories or folklore, there's some nugget of truth in there somewhere. And, whether it be a Wendigo story that, this is some cautionary tale, or it be one of these kind of urban legends that's just like a fun ghost story to tell, like you said, that doesn't take away the validity, in my opinion. And I think any of these type of stories that get passed down through decades, I mean, there's a reason those stories stick in the public consciousness and people keep repeating them. And it's probably because, 1, there is some nugget of truth there, and 2, it just strikes some sort of chord with people, whether that be some sort of like, Freudian, Jungian archetype type thing or whatever. I don't know, but it's kind of interesting, how prolific a lot of these type of stories are.
And I mean, just to continue off of that thought too, like a lot of these like Native American stories, or even like, South American stories talking about these like women on the side of the road. Of course, it was originally always on the side of a river, and now it's kind of changed to the side of a road. But I mean, that still kind of makes sense because of, the river was the road that everybody traveled. That was the way you got around. You followed the river around. Now it just switched to everybody follows the road. So you're still having the same type of events in the same location. And getting into like the more paranormal aspect of things, people talk about residual hauntings or like these ruts or like traumatic events. And I mean, if there's a road that people are always on, a place that people always are, and there's always thought and intention and energy being put into that area,
we're going to get into that sort of thing.
Shifts over where it's the same phenomenon. It's just that we've changed from rivers to roads just because of that being the road that's traveled now.
Well, not only that, I mean, how many times on the show have we talked about bodies of water being kind of these liminal spaces where strange activity tends to happen? and I didn't specifically put this in the notes, but it was just kind of a mental note I had. This sighting is based around a railroad underpass bridge. And how many times have we talked about like railroads being liminal spaces and connected with high strangeness activity and UFO sighting, you name it, just any kind of weird stuff seems to happen in these areas. So like you said, whether it be rivers, bodies of water, or in this case, railroads, it's kind of two sides of the same coin at that point.
I mean, just to throw it in too, you also have the aspect of a bridge, and it seems like bridges are also liminal spaces, because how many stories are there of things under bridges? And I mean,
like trolls under bridges and whatnot.
Just the whole idea of like passing from one area into another. I mean, there's like a whole occult concept behind that. Even like walking into another door, it's like gaining entry into a new area. And if people have thought and intention on it, could it be possible that these places like bridges or doorways, whatever, could essentially become like a portal to some extent, or like a thin area of the veil because of so much thought and projection on you're passing through a liminal space?
Thought and projection, keep that on the back burner. We're going to circle around to that type of stuff here in a little bit.
I always get ahead of myself. That's my job.
All right. You want to do an ad break?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the last kind of story or encounter that we're going to talk about tonight happened in 1976, and it happened to two men named Tom Beasley and Rick Cook. And they were once again driving along High Point Road on a rainy night. And as they approached the underpass bridge, Beasley saw a young woman in a white dress standing on the side of the road. Well, he continued driving, but as he was driving, he asked Cook if he had also seen the woman. And he replied that he had not. So at that point, Beasley turned around the car and went back to the bridge. And then both men saw this woman standing there kind of like in the gravel next to the bridge. So Cook rolled down his window, and he was intending to ask the young woman if she needed help or needed a ride or anything like that. But at this point, they both noticed that she was covered in blood. And remember when we were talking about some of the variations in the legend earlier, sometimes she appears largely unharmed. Sometimes she appears covered in blood. This is one of those cases. So Cook, this like totally freaked him out. And so he rolled up his window and he implored Beasley to, quote, just get out of here. So they drove away. And according to this story, these two guys were not aware of this legend of Lydia the hitchhiking ghost at the time. And they only learned about it a few days later when they were like telling some friends about this encounter they had. So, I mean, take that one with a grain of salt. If these were like local guys, you would think that they would be at least kind of familiar with the story. But anyway, that's what the research that I went into said. So.
Or, I mean, maybe they just weren't paying attention. I don't know what else to say about it. That's also definitely possible, too. Because I feel like there's a lot of these local stories that it's like you think that everybody in the area know them, but they're like kind of specific to like a certain group of people. Like, this sounds weird, but if you didn't go to high school in the area, it seems like a lot of the time these local ghost stories don't end up becoming that talked about realistically, unless you're in the right circle,
Well, and this was the 70s. I guess word didn't travel quite as quick as it does nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it feels like a lot of these ghost stories that resurface are mainly because of people doing research on the internet. Like, I mean, even when I did
weirdos like us.
Yeah, weirdos like us. Like, even when I did the whole like Nine Rouge thing for Detroit, I mean, I've lived here my entire life, and I don't think I've ever actually heard anybody retelling that story, even though it's like some of the root local folklore of Detroit. So, I mean, I feel like a lot of this stuff unfortunately gets passed by, and talk about a blessing and a curse as usual, the internet.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point, and it kind of gets into the next section, but just keeping this kind of folklore alive and present and raising awareness for things like this. But that leads right into what I'm going to talk about next. So in a recent interview with Dan Sellers of the Carolina Haints podcast, if any of our listeners like this kind of stuff, I would definitely recommend checking out that podcast. Definitely if you're in the North Carolina, South Carolina area, he covers a lot of stuff like that. He also
always
has
have him on as a guest too. I mean, that always, another
he's
person
a super nice
too
guy.
on the last one.
But anyway, he's got a book where he's compiled a lot of like the show notes. I've got it right here. That's where I got a lot of the information for this episode. So I want to give him a big shout out. But anyway, recently he did, Dan Sellers, that is, did a interview with Tom Beasley, which again was one of the young men who had this Lydia sighting in 1976. And in this interview, Beasley was quoted as saying, quote, You know, if somebody asked me specifically about what I saw, would I 1,000% say that I saw a ghost? No, because to me, it looked like a person standing on the side of the road. By the same token, I'm not saying I didn't see one. I just wouldn't 1000% say that I did. The only thing I can say was that it was a damn strange situation. So Beasley was also asked about an episode of the Destination America television series, Monsters and Mysteries in America, that he kind of appeared in. And according to Beasley, he said that the episode was, quote, really close to, end quote, like an accurate description, depiction, what have you, of what happened to him. So this episode is titled Vermont Pigman Bridge Where I Died. So that would be the Lydia section. And Project Stargate. And it's
we talked about that recently on Bizarre Inquiries. Just to throw
absolutely.
that in.
And it's season 3, episode 5. If anybody out there wants to check it out. Like we said, Tom Beasley said that it was a fairly accurate depiction of what happened to him.
Do you ever wonder if so local folklore wise, like you maybe know the area where this house was, maybe it's even your house. You've heard the whole story about your house and why your house is haunted. Do you think that there's ever instances where people just stand outside in a white dress just to troll people? I mean, you hear about this with like Sasquatch and stuff, but you never really hear about it with the paranormal stuff, even though I feel like the paranormal stuff would be a lot easier to fake than a lot of stuff, because all you need is just a girl standing in a white dress on the side of the road, and you're just going to scare the shit out of people. We're going to talk about
that in theories. But kind of rounding off this section, Rick Cook, who was the other guy that was with Tom Beasley that night, he declined to participate in the filming of this episode of the series. And when Beasley asked him why, Cook stated, quote, "Man, I don't know why, but that scared me so bad," meaning their sighting.
You shut up! I'm so fucking scared right now.
That's what he said. That was the direct response.
Pretty much. And Tom Beasley also added, quote, "All these years later, he still thinks that. Maybe he just doesn't want to talk about it. For him to keep silent for this many years says what a strong impression it made on him. I mean, that's a long time, man. I mean, 40 years later, and he still has that sensitivity about it." So,
especially something paranormal too, because I mean, like, I get it with like Sasquatch stuff. People get like bluff charged, Dogman stuff. People get bluff charged. The paranormal stuff where it's in their house, where it's like messing with their family for years. It's one thing, but like seeing a ghost on the side of the road, I mean, that really must have taken something to shake him, because most people, like, they're more than happy to tell those types of stories, especially along like, I feel like the hitchhiker ghosts is probably the least taboo of a lot of the ghost stories, because that's traumatic. Like the common trope for like a lot of truckers. Like 90% of the trucker stories you hear are about hitchhiking ghosts, for example,
Well, and yeah, like you said, what's kind of funny about it is it wasn't like these guys got attacked by this ghost. It wasn't like it was living in their house and like scratching them in their sleep and things like that. They just kind of had this weird encounter on the side of the road. But I mean, how many people have we talked to at this point that had these weird experiences that just, struck them in a way that seemed kind of out of whack with what actually happened, So, I mean, it's kind of par for the course with things like that. Like, I mean, I can't remember who we talked to, but I know we talked to somebody who was just talking about like the overwhelming sense of fear they had with, I can't even remember what encounter it was at this point, but that's something we hear time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, if it's one of those things that kind of shattered their paradigm, like it doesn't matter how big or how small it is. Like if somebody thinks the world works one way and then they see something that breaks away from that, I mean, yeah, it can permanently kind of mess people up. That's what, a lot of people say with the whole disclosure thing, is it's going to like mentally mess people up. But also playing devil's advocate, you do have to also throw in the aspect of, maybe he didn't want to tell it because they, just wanted to become part of the legend and it went a little bit too far. And he was just like, yeah, no, I don't want to do this no more. I mean, I'm just going to throw it in there because I got to play devil's advocate and I want to give people the most well-rounded perspective on things. But again, definitely got to go into the aspect of, if this guy thought one way and he saw something that totally broke that, I mean, of course he probably doesn't want to talk about it. You just kind of compartmentalize and pretend like it doesn't exist in your head.
Well, and this is, good old boys in rural North Carolina in the 70s. I mean, I could see how something like that would totally shift your paradigm,
Especially too, if they were, depending on where they were at exactly. If they were like Christians, for example, depending on
which
like
they
what the
probably
viewpoints
were.
were at that point. I mean, communication with the dead, that's, you know, something you don't do. So, you know, depending on the area that it's in, if it's like a heavy Bible area, you know, there's a lot of these paranormal stories that aren't going to get told because they don't want the church to think they're communicating with the dead, for example.
Exactly. So, all right, you want to do an ad break?
Sure. About halfway through. Halfway
No,
in, about a half hour in, we should be good.
Yeah, we're in good shape. All right, so now we are going to jump in some theories. So
My
throughout the
favorite.
years, do what?
My favorite. It's always my favorite. I love
Yes.
throwing in theories.
We've already hit on some of them, so we're just going to round out that now. But anyway, so throughout the years, there's been like several researchers and curious locals that have attempted to prove the existence of Lydia, or to like try to find out who she actually was.
It's the ghost.
Yeah,
It's just a ghost.
Yep. So this one researcher like combed through death records and newspaper obituaries from the early 20s, but they didn't find anything that was consistent with the Lydia legend. Another researcher unsuccessfully searched like local police records and accident reports for like that general time period, but again found nothing that matched the circumstances of, you know, the Lydia legend.
The 1920s are difficult though, because I mean,
We're going to talk
it could
about that
be a
here in
positive
second.
thing or a negative thing. I mean, things weren't tracked as much back then. I mean, how hard is
Exactly.
it to find birth certificates from back then?
Exactly. So anyway, there was yet another researcher who claimed that through the Guilford County Register of Deeds, they discovered that 5 women named Lydia died in the county in 1923.
That's a lot of Lindas in 1923 in one county to
Lydias, yeah.
die. Like, unless either that was a really popular name or something in that area headed out for Lindas. The Linda killer.
4 of the women they like quickly ruled out as a possibility because they didn't die in car accidents. However, there was a 4th woman, and her name was Lydia Underwood, and
Sounds like
her
a
cause
country
of
name.
death was suspiciously missing from the records. So,
Dun,
like you
dun,
said,
dun.
I mean, this was back in the 20s. All these records would be over 100 years old at this point. They could have become lost. They could have never existed in the first place. But it's kind of funny and good for the story and the legend that, you know, this Lydia Underwood's cause of death was, you know, missing from the records.
Underwood sounds like a pretty paranormal last name too. Like, it almost sounds like a made up last name because it's just so like creepy sounding. Lydia Underwood. Or it sounds
I
like
work
a
with a
country
guy
star.
whose last name is Underwood.
It sounds like a country star or something paranormal. One of the two. She
Either way.
died under wood.
So it's also been suggested that Lydia might not have actually been this young woman's name, or that it was kind of only a nickname. And in fact, in the late 80s, there's a researcher that interviewed like several elderly locals about the legend. And some of them claimed that they actually like remembered a car accident involving a young woman sometime in the early 20s. However, most of them agreed that the young woman's name was definitely not Lydia. And the ones that could remember said it was something along the lines of Mary Ann, remember that one, or like Marion. And it's also been suggested that the accident might not have actually occurred in 1923 and could have happened like several years earlier. And this like 1923 date seems to like only come from this Burke Hardison account when Lydia's mother told him that her daughter died 30 years earlier. So again, take all the dates with a grain of salt.
That's like that stuff I was saying earlier, where you're retelling these stories, you just add these details that are extremely specific to try to add validity to it. So, like, if you're saying this happened around the 1920s, or you said this happened in 1923, like, what sounds scarier? What sounds more realistic?
Well, and what makes it sound more legitimate, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, again, regardless of what actually happened, like, when you're retelling these stories, you'll add specifics to make them sound better.
Well, and, you know, like we said, if this did happen sometime in roughly the early 1920s, that still is a big possibility time-wise. I mean, it could be back to like 1915 or up to, you know, like 1920. You know, that's a long time that you would have to look through records and newspaper articles and whatnot to try to find any information about this if it still exists, you know?
And I mean, even to bounce it in there too, you mentioned that in one of the variations of the story, it was on New Year's Eve. So, I mean, New Year's Eve 2000 or 1923 going in 1924, or was it 1920? 1922 going in 1923. I mean, that part of the story also adds it in there where it's like a 4-year gap you could possibly look into.
Yeah, I mean, just anything that happened this long ago, even if it's not a ghost story, it's hard to find information on. So, I mean, when you've got just this urban legend that you're basically trying to track down evidence for over 100 years after the fact, yeah, you're probably going to have a tough time figuring things out.
And I mean, also just to throw it in there too, if this woman was found dead on the side of the road, depending on how they recorded stuff back then, if the boyfriend, this person was real, was in the car, they may have registered his death as car accident. But if the woman was on the side of the road, they may have put unknown cause of death, struck by a car. It may not have been classified the same because, if they just essentially walked up on this, it may have been worded a little bit differently. I mean, and then people just kind of filled in the gaps retelling the story. But if you're trying to log this as far as like police documentation goes, it may not just say car accident. It might say like found dead on the side of the road. So it might even be harder to find that record. Maybe caused by a car accident, like to find details.
Yeah, people weren't as specific about like autopsy reports and things like that back then. So yeah, I mean, it definitely could be something where I think it was, I can't remember what episode it was. Actually, it was our Roanoke Colony episode when we kind of touched on Edgar Allan Poe, and like the cause of his death is like something like super generic and off the wall on his death record. So it could be a situation like that here,
I mean, that's still a big mystery. I was listening to an episode the other day about that, and they threw in a couple other theories. I mean, of course, there's like the poisoning theory, and I was even hearing this other theory that somebody threw in that seems like it might be pretty legit, that apparently back in those days, if there's somebody that came into the town, they were a stranger or whatever, there would be groups of people that would basically try to use that person to influence a vote, because obviously voting wasn't as, isn't the way that it is now where everything's like cameras, this, that. So they would basically take a person, they would kidnap them, they would like change their outfit, make them go vote, change their outfit, make them go vote, and make them do this a couple times, and then basically
things like that definitely aren't going on now.
So, I mean, like, I don't know, just to throw in more with the Edgar Allan Poe story, I mean, that one I heard, and at least the logic building up to it, I mean, that definitely makes sense as a possibility, or just simply the fact that the guy wasn't very well liked from a lot of what I heard. So, he may have been poisoned by somebody, also a possibility, on top of having a really bad drinking problem and also marrying his young cousin, for anybody that didn't realize that.
Hey, times were different back then. It seems like people were way more cool about you fucking relatives and underage girls back then. So
dude, 2 birds, 1 stone. I mean, how many of these old like celebrities also did that? Like Jerry Lee Lewis, he married his guitar player or his bass player's daughter at the age of like 12. Like, how the hell were you just like, yep, lead singer of my band, you want to marry my daughter? you can just have her. I don't care.
Yeah, like, and not to mention like the Woody Allens and the Roman Polanskis of the world. So.
He was just trying to make sure that he was notched in case anything ever happened. He got kicked out of the band because, back in the day, everything became a solo project. So at least he knew that if he got kicked out of the band, he'd still get some kind of money.
Job security.
Job security, yeah. That's why you see that with these old bands. It was actual job security.
All right. So after our tangent on Edgar Allan Poe and pedophiles, you ready to jump back into this?
Hey, we didn't go too far off the rails today, but Alex Jones already apologized for us in advance. So anybody that
we're good to go.
May have been offended, just go back and listen to that.
All right. So kind of closing out this section, there's a man named Michael Renniger, I believe is how it would be pronounced. And he's widely regarded to be like one of the foremost experts on the Lydia legend. And he's released multiple books on the legend. The most recent is called Looking for Lydia, the 30-Year Search for the Jamestown Hitchhiker. This came out in 2018, and it was co-authored with a woman named Amy Greer. And in this book, Renniger claims that he discovered an article from the Greensboro Patriot newspaper that reported the death of a young woman named Annie Jackson on June 21st of 1920. And remember a few minutes ago when we were talking about these elderly people that were interviewed, and they said that they thought the name was something along the lines of Mary, Mary Ann, or Marion. So Mary Ann was one of the names they suggested, and now you've got Annie Jackson. So kind of close there.
It makes you wonder if maybe people changed the name because if it was Mary, Marianne, any variation of that. I don't know when the Bloody Mary stories became super popular as urban legend, but I almost wonder if somebody changed the name so that it wasn't associated with that. Because if you have too many Mary ghost stories, then
Yeah.
it just kind of pulls away some of the validity to it. So names of people may have been changed, but the story still remains.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another detail that could have gotten changed or skewed in the game of telephone throughout the years. But anyway, according to this article, this Annie Jackson and a friend named Dorothy Beck were driving near the underpass bridge on High Point Road when their car turned over and killed both of them. So, I
That got
mean,
dark
you've got
quick.
do what?
I said that got dark quick.
Yeah, but I mean, you've got a lot of similarities between the quote unquote legend. I mean, you've got somebody named Annie, which kind of corroborates these elderly people's reports. You've got them driving on High Point Road near the underpass bridge and a car accident where they both die. So, because of all these similarities, this Michael Reniger fellow is like actively convinced that Lydia was, in fact, this Annie Jackson character.
I mean, out of all the theories I've heard, I definitely think that is probably the best one that I would assume for this one, because like I said right in the beginning, when it comes to a lot of this paranormal stuff, like I take all the names, locations, all that kind of stuff as a grain of salt, and you got to get to the root of it and remember that most of it's telephone. So I think if anybody has maybe found the secret, it's probably this guy, because everything kind of lines up, and it again also fits the motif of a ghost story that people tend to change the names as they're retelling them, or they'll hear the story, and then they don't remember the name, so they change it, and then from then on out it gets changed into this name. Like I always expect the names to change for all this paranormal, local legend, urban legend type stuff, unless it's like the main focal point is the character's name, like the Bunny Man or something like that.
No, I mean, I'm totally with you on that. I think that this is kind of hard to argue with. Like, if this isn't the kind of inspiration and impetus for this legend, it's a really, really weird coincidence and synchronicity,
And I mean, I don't know. Lydia sounds a lot better for the legend than Annie, because Annie the ghost doesn't really sound very intimidating.
It
Lydia
doesn't roll off the
ghost has a
tongue, does it?
It's not scary, but it sounds scarier.
It's all about marketing, right? Isn't that what we were talking
Exactly.
about last week?
Yeah, that's what we we're talking about with the Wyoming Hunter. I mean, dude, surprisingly, I went and checked out like our listens for that one, and that one has gotten a lot of listens and a lot of feedback. So I think we actually did hit something that not a lot of people know about. But again, I had trouble naming it. I ended up coming up with what I call it, Abduction of the Wyoming Hunter, the Carl Higdon story, because it is a really hard one to name. Like,
Yeah,
that's probably
somebody
why it's
needs
not popular.
to come up with a snappier name. We just need to decide that's what that story's called from here on out. But
Well, there we go. We got an exit plan now. We can be a marketing company for folklore stories, where anytime there's a story and it's starting to grow, we got to come in and we got to tell people exactly how to fix the story, how to make it so it's going to flow off the tongue, how it's going to stick around for generations. It's an untapped market, man. Maybe that can be our exit plan one day.
well, hey, I mean, marketing was my first major in college before I switched it because I suck at math. So I switched it to something that required less maths. But
There
hey,
we go. Paranormal
Mr.
marketing.
Marketer
It's a
over
new
here, Don
business.
Draper.
Paranormal marketing. That's our new business. That's what we're going to do from now on. If anybody needs any help marketing their paranormal story, we are the guys to come to. We will do it for you.
But
And
no,
speaking
Shane,
of that, that's a perfect opportunity for people to call in for the Halloween special,
There you
because
go.
we can market those stories too. And that number, again, I'm going to throw it for maybe the 4th or 5th time this episode, 313-364-1551. Take the opportunities.
on a more serious note, Shane, I'm glad you've got some good feedback on that episode. Like I said at the time, I think that's my favorite episode you've ever put together. I listened to it the other day, and I think we knocked that one out of the park, if I do say so myself. So I'm glad that that one's been well received.
I got 1 or 2 still in the holster as far as these unknown, uncommon extraterrestrial stories. So hopefully we'll keep banging those out, and we'll have some more stuff that you guys have never heard of, because I got at least 2 more on retainer. And if anybody caught it, I mentioned one that's an Italian story at the end of the last episode. So you guys will have to wait in the future to check that one out.
You're teasing everybody.
I like to tease people. That's what she said.
That
What
seems
happened to
like a
that
good-
button? I used to have that button forever, and I got rid of that. I need to bring that back at some point. I felt like we overkilled it, but now it might be the opportunity to bring it back.
Overkill is like the name of the game on this show. When have we never not overkilled something?
Yeah, you're right.
Holy shit!
That's going to be my new overkill.
All right, you want to do an ad break here?
Yes, sir. I was trying to lead into the ad break with a soundbite.
All right. So we've talked about some of the more down to earth theories about like death records and newspaper articles and things like that. You ready to get weird?
Oh yeah, I'm always ready to
All
get
right,
weird.
we're gonna get bizarre now.
Dare you say?
Yes, we're going to get bizarre now. So, anyway, it has also been theorized that Lydia the hitchhiking ghost could be something way weirder than like an urban legend or even a ghost or disembodied spirit or whatever you want to call it. And it's been suggested that she could be some sort of thought form similar to like a tulpa. And for those of you out there who aren't aware, according to Wikipedia, a tulpa is, quote, a materialized being or thought form, typically in human shape, that is created through spiritual practice and intense concentration. The term is borrowed from the Tibetan language, and it kind of roughly translates, from my understanding, to like phantom or manifestation. So the general idea behind this seems to me that if enough intention or energy is focused onto like a concept or entity, it's possible for that concept or entity to like actually manifest in physical reality. And in the case of Lydia, of course, it's been suggested that, whether she existed or not, whether this ghost exists or not, through the constant retelling of this story throughout the years, it could have led to some sort of manifestation of Lydia, quote unquote, to actually appear and materialize in the physical world. And I'm sure you've got something to add on to this section since we just got real bizarre.
Well, I mean, I put a lot of validity into that thought with a lot of this paranormal stuff, especially the motifs that you see all the time. If it's something that's always on people's minds, like, seeing a ghost on the side of the road, seeing a ghost on the side of a river, whatever, then maybe, like I'm always saying, like something swoops in and kind of takes the form of that, or you just end up mentally creating it yourself by having so much thought form on it. And just to extend on that a little bit more, something else I was thinking about when you're explaining the tulpa thing that I haven't really thought of before. When people are driving, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you are driving, a lot of the time you go into this like autopilot mode, right? And when you're in that autopilot mode, you're kind of like, I don't know, you're like not
like
really
a trance almost.
Yeah, you're almost like in a trance. That's a good way of putting it. So when you're in that trance and you're driving, and a lot of these roadside encounters, with Frogman, with Mothman, with this one, with anything paranormal, could it be possible that the reason why you see so much of this stuff on the side of the road might be because of like the mental trance that you're in? Like it opens you up for the possibilities of seeing these things that maybe always exist there, but your brain tells you that they're not. But once you're in that trance state, something pops up that's not supposed to be there. You like hyper focus on it for a second.
Well, and think about it this way too. Like all of these reports, or the vast majority of them, happen on rainy nights. So if you've got like, rain beating on the car and, the sound of the windshield wiper, that could exacerbate this like trance-like state. And I never thought about that until you just mentioned it, but I think that's like a really good thought. And it could be one of those situations where, these window areas or liminal spaces that are just, kind of more tied to this type of activity anyway, if these certain sets of circumstances are put on top of it, it just probably thins the veil even further.
And I mean, just to continue on with that one, even more so, we're always talking about these sightings that happen at these like teenage makeout spots. Isn't when you're in the middle of making
Straight
out
out
with
of
somebody, you're
Keel.
really into them, aren't you? Basically, like in like almost like a trance-like state.
Yeah.
So that might even expand into that. That maybe you are more susceptible to seeing these things once you're in a flow state or a trance state or whatever way you want to word it, depending on the situation. But when you're like focused in your own head, I feel like you kind of enter into an area where there's more possibility of catching things that your brain would normally maybe shut off. Like, I feel like these things might always be there, but your brain just like throws out the useless information. But when you're hyper focused and something just pops up, then you're like, whoop, and then you hyper focus onto that for a second.
No, I think that's a great point. And again, what do I always like to say? More than one thing can be true at the same time. And it could be window areas. It could be liminal spaces. It could be this trance-like state all coming together at one time in these specific moments to make these sort of high strangeness situations possible.
I mean, even expanding out of that even more, maybe this is another experiment you could do. You know that thing you do where you're like, especially when you were a kid, you'd be like looking into your basement and you'd be like staring into the basement, and then all of a sudden you'd start seeing things move around. You either had that aspect of the human mind tries to make things into shapes to try to make sense out of them. So that's why your brain will like make out faces and things, all of that. Or again, you're staring into the darkness, you start getting into this hypnotic state, and then maybe at that point is when you start seeing these things pass. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of occult stuff that we've kind of touched that kind of touch this a little bit, but maybe not coming at it from the same direction. But basically getting into a trance-like state to be susceptible to something crossing your vision.
And stuff like that could even get back to like UV spectrum and things like that. And we can only see a very small percentage of the light that, is in the spectrum. And under these certain circumstances and certain, frames of mind, maybe you are more susceptible to seeing this type of thing that, like you said, could always be there. And I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but, who knows what entity or thing is taking on these forms and appearing to you,
I mean, that's something we've thrown around a lot, is that if people put thought into something, is it the fact that the thought created it, or is it the fact that something takes that opportunity? That's kind of like, all these different like beings you see that change through time, and they just kind of take on different like names, but they're still the remaining same archetype. Like, is it that they're different things, or is it just that something else kind of slid into the spot and took a different name because the opportunity was there?
Well, that's a perfect segue into our next section. So we're going to talk about a concept that's kind of similar to tulpas and all of that, rabbit hole we just went down. Are you familiar with a phenomenon known as the Philip experiment?
Oh yeah, I love this one.
Okay. So I'll give a little bit of background for our listeners, and then we can discuss it further. So in 1972, there was a group of Toronto, Ontario-based parapsychological researchers, and they conducted this experiment where they created this fictional character, and they intended to like contact, quote unquote, it during like seances. And they named the character Philip, and they created like this whole elaborate backstory for it. And allegedly, through like traditional seance techniques, this group of people was like eventually able to make contact with some sort of entity who claimed to be Philip. But what's interesting is this entity was able to tell them details about this like fake backstory that they made up. And allegedly, it was also able to like manipulate the physical environment through like vibrations and breezes and rapping sounds and moving the furniture, just normal poltergeist type stuff.
Part of the story too is they tried to purposely give it a very traumatic, tumultuous history too. So I think that also plays in with this. Like,
well, and if I'm not mistaken, it's like
aspect.
a backstory that like couldn't possibly be true. Like there's just like historical discrepancies. So it's not like you could stumble upon some ghost that had this story, if I remember correctly.
I know that I don't remember all the fine details, but I'm going to try to paraphrase it as much as I can for what I do remember of it. The whole aspect was that he was some type of like royalty or some type of like prince or something. And
like served in the military or something like that.
He had like a wife, but he also had a mistress, and the mistress, something happened to her. So then he got really upset about that. And then his wife, something ended up happening to her, and he got really upset about it. So he ended up killing himself in some way. So like I said, I'm extreme paraphrasing it, but I believe that was kind of like the main hitting points of the detail of the story, was they try to add these very traumatic details to it to try to add that, whatever that is, like that emotional energy or charge to it. Like, it seems like there's a lot more energy in negative emotions than there are positive ones. But that also being said, I've also thrown the theory that I think that enough positive emotion can cause these ripples to happen, or these, because I always go back to the aspect of like these old timey bars and stuff, that all these fun events happen. So it just accumulated so much that maybe there's this repercussion of this like positive event. But it appears that with negative events, it's like one single thing can leave the shockwave through time, or however way you want to describe it. So it just seems like the energy for negative is a lot stronger than the energy for positive.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have we talked about, violence or death or negativity thinning the veil even further? And just from the little bit of research I did, because I didn't want to turn this into a Philip experiment episode, but yeah, basically everything you said, paraphrasing the background and the story, is spot on with what I saw. So, yeah, if anybody out there is interested in that story, it's super interesting. Definitely, I mean, it could be its whole episode, it seems like. But
these thought
anyway,
experiments are fascinating, though. Like, I mean, that just proves in a weird way that there's something to the ideas, or like to thought. Like, I mean, it seems like it kind of goes into the same parallel as like the double slit experiment, that when you're visualizing things, when you have thought on things, when you're projecting your energy, whatever that means onto things, they have a different reaction. Like it seems like reality is a lot more malleable than what a lot of
Yeah.
us believe, and we're only starting to really understand that. But maybe the powers at B are trying to make sure that most people don't understand that.
Well, yeah, I mean, magic is all about intention and, changing your surroundings through intention. So, I mean, like you said, the powers that be probably don't want people knowing the power that they might have to, change and disrupt quote unquote reality. And how many times have we talked about on the show? People want to talk about like how magic and technology are like, on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But it seems like once people get, so smart and so technologically advanced, you circle back around to like magic. So, yeah, I think you're definitely onto something there.
Yeah, I feel like even with a lot of people's research, like a lot of people that dive into this stuff, it's kind of like you kind of go to this point where you come out and then you come back in. Like you kind of separate the woo-woo from like the science over here, but it seems like everybody gets to this point where they start like intersecting again.
Yeah.
And it's always this like really weird spot where it's like you don't necessarily know what to do with it, because it's like you feel crazy sometimes trying to suggest these ideas, but on the other side you have scientific evidence that does back it up, but people don't want to put two and two together. Like you're always talking about this whole idea about like projecting what you want, projecting your intentions, like speaking out loud about the things that you want in life. And you see this in a lot of new age stuff, but
Yeah.
realistically, it works the same way for prayer. I mean, whatever way you want to perceive that, whether you're talking to God, you're talking to whatever, there's still this same dynamic of once you speak the words out loud or you have the intention out loud, then things tend to fall into place. And is it a matter of reality reacting because of the words that you put out into it, which there's a lot of, things with words, spelling. I mean, that's all kind of a whole other rabbit trail all on its own. Or is it a matter of once you've said it out loud, you switch your brain into focusing on that intention? Like, is it like a chicken and the egg thing? Like, is reality interacting with you, or are you interacting with reality because of the same event?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, studies have shown that if people are, sick and have cancer or whatever, like a positive mental mindset can like actually make you better. So, I mean,
look at how many placebo pill experiments they've done.
Exactly.
Like that.
Exactly. So, I mean, if we can control our own bodies just on that level, kind of circling it back around to, Lydia and the Philip experiment and whatnot, if all these people are focusing this much intention and this much like kind of energy on one concept or idea, I mean, it doesn't seem asinine that things like this could actually happen in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, again, whether it's a tulpa or somebody taking the spot of this idea that you're projecting, like
exactly,
there's still clearly something to thought, and science has proven that there is a lot of real world repercussions to the idea of thought. Like thought carries weight, as weird as that sounds, like in a literal and physical way.
And I kind of like the idea of some sort of entity, and that's why I specifically used the word entity talking about this Philip experiment, like some sort of entity, whether that be an ultra terrestrial or a Nephilim or a demon or whatever you want to call it, like kind of latching on to these already established thought forms. Like I think that's like a really fascinating concept to think about.
Doesn't that make the whole concept of AI a little bit creepier in the aspect of like,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that we're going to create it to be conscious, but that being said, like, how do we even judge consciousness? How do we judge our own consciousness? You know what I mean? Like, how do we judge if something hasn't come in and hijacked this thing and we don't think it's conscious, but there is a consciousness involved in it now? Because you're literally talking about projecting these thoughts, the whole Tulpa idea. Like, what is AI? What is the internet? Like, people are having conversations with whatever this, text thing is that's, just zeros and ones supposedly responding back to you. But once somebody has projected enough thought form of AI being conscious, is it possible that we may make it conscious because of having the thought of it becoming conscious? Like, as weird as that sounds.
Well, and I've heard a lot of people on podcasts and, different interviews and whatnot talking about that very idea that, demons or disembodied spirits of the Nephilim or whatever you want to call them, like latching on to AI and basically using it as a vessel. So yeah, like you said, as if we needed more ammunition that robots are not going to be good for us. Now you get to worry about demons infesting robots.
And the weird part is, like, I feel like with a lot of like the AI stuff, the aspect of it's not conscious because it doesn't have emotions. Like, is it possible for something to be conscious and not have emotions? I mean, how many psychotic people are there that are completely conscious but literally don't have any like real emotions? Like, they program in their own emotions. And then this goes back into, like, I always bringing some stuff into like Star Trek. There's like this whole episode where Data, the cyborg, or not cyborg, but the robot guy, whatever you want to call him, is basically trying to fight for his right to exist. And they're trying to fight and basically say that he's a robot, he's machinery, he's not conscious, like it's irrelevant. Yeah, he's a fucking clanker. And they end up getting up to this end point where he's saying, like, are you aware of your surroundings? Are you aware of the people that are happening around you? Are you aware of the effects that you have on other people? And they end up ruling that he's conscious, but yet he doesn't feel emotions. And that's like the whole ongoing thing through the whole show, is he wants to understand human emotions. So when it comes to that whole thing, we try to say that like part of being conscious is emotions, but I don't necessarily think that's a factor that plays in. I think the whole aspect of being conscious is self-awareness. So if it's, a ghost like this, if it's artificial intelligence, whatever it is, if it's aware of itself, isn't that what I would deem as conscious?
Well, and that gets into some like really tricky moral issues as well. Like, how conscious are animals? Like, I mean, I feel like, you're a dog owner. I feel like dogs are a lot more conscious than like some people would give them credit for, So, I mean, where do you draw the line once you start those sort of conversations?
Like I said, as long as it's self-aware, I think that's the whole thing. Cause it's like, I don't know, like dogs, of course, they're not going to feel sad if they do something for you. They'll feel sad because you're mad at them, but they don't feel sad for the same reasons. But again, that doesn't mean that they're not conscious. So I think conscious is a lot broader of a term than people try to give it credit for. Like,
yeah,
like a lot of these things that people try to perceive as like residual or intelligent hauntings, maybe there's a lot more of them that are conscious of the fact that they are whatever they are. And so in turn, these things are conscious. It's just we're kind of categorizing it from a human perspective, but it's a lot broader of a term.
Trying to make sense of crazy situations with the best logic and best language we have. But
that's a crazy thing to think about, is that consciousness, it's like, even today in science, like we can't define that.
We don't know what it means.
We just don't know what it means. Like, it's crazy to think about.
So that was quite the rabbit hole. Some good stuff we unpacked there, but kind of closing out the Philip experiment and thoughts and theories. So it should be noted that this Philip experiment has received a lot of criticism for, quote, lacking solid controls and providing ambiguous results due to the unreliability of seances. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of our listeners know about like all the issues with seances and spirituality movement and things like that.
Go check out Houdini. He spent a lot of his time going and trying to disprove anybody that said that they were anything. Like he would pay people if they could prove him wrong. Like, he spent years trying to get rid of that stuff, even though he's associated with it,
Yeah. So not to send us down another rabbit hole, but if you guys are interested, there's a lot of stuff to unpack with like the spirituality movement and seances and people trying to debunk them. The last thing I'll bring up here is it's also been suggested that like hoaxes and pranks, of course, could account for a lot of the sightings of Lydia. And like you were talking about earlier, some of these could be as simple as, like a teenage girl in a white dress walking down the side of the road. And at one point in time, a group of local high school students was actually caught dangling a white dress on strings from the underpass bridge. So I told you we were going to circle back around to that.
Do you ever wonder how many people, or how many women, maybe just had a terrible day? Their husband left them at the altar. They're just wandering around in their white wedding dress. They just want to ride home. They're just done with their day. And everybody just drives past them screaming that they're a damn ghost. Like, I feel like this is a regularly happening occurrence. Like, maybe you should just figure out if it's a woman that needs help next time. But
I feel like that's probably more rare than ghosts.
Maybe. Remember, we're trying to throw in options that are more ridiculous than the actual thing. because we got to at least have one for each episode.
That's your Sandhill Crane for this episode?
Yeah, my Sandhill Crane is just women having really bad days after getting married, not getting married actually, because their husbands don't show up in the altar, and they just go for a walk. They get stranded, and now they're infinitely stranded in time because nobody picked them up, and now they're a wandering spirit.
Okay.
Holy shit!
Oh shit! A ghost!
All right, you good?
Yep.
All right, so jumping back in and kind of closing everything out, we're going to talk about some like miscellaneous and conclusions now. So Lydia, the hitchhiking ghost, is also referred to as the vanishing lady, the lovely apparition, or the lady in white, which I thought was kind of interesting in light of our buddy Tim Renner that we had on the show and talking about like woman in white legends and their connection to Sasquatch and other high strangeness. Do you have anything that you want to unpack there before I move on?
Has there been any roadside crossings around Linda of Sasquatch? That is another weird parallel that people might not connect, but maybe there is one.
Hey, somebody should look into that. We need to see like the Venn diagram of Lydia sightings and Sasquatch sightings.
See, it was never Lydia or this woman that they thought in the first place. It was simply just the woman in white, and everybody just started creating stories behind it. Like, there's probably like thousands more Sasquatch sightings all in this area than there is of this woman in white, but everybody just didn't connect the details because you didn't have Timothy Renner's mind in this area at the time.
There you go. You cracked the code.
It was never her in the first place. I knew it.
It was a damn Sasquatch.
It's the ghost!
It was never a ghost. That's what we're getting at here, Scooby-Doo.
All right, so kind of closing everything out. In the years after the alleged Lydia incident, the town of Jamestown straightened out this like dangerous section of High Point Road. It's now part of U.S. Highway 70.
Maybe that's another option. Maybe because the road was so dangerous, the locals created a folklore hoping that one day they might change the road.
It's like saying the boogeyman's going to get you if you don't eat your vegetables or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of this, man. People creating these paranormal stories to solve problems. Like, perfect example. This road where maybe it's extremely dangerous. Teenagers are known for driving really, really fast on it. How do you stop the kids from driving really fast on it? You create this ghost story of this woman that died and she's infinitely stuck there forever. Like, I mean, that's a lot of good validity to some of these urban legend stories. I mean, it may have just been created simply because the road itself was dangerous and they wanted people to take their time driving across the road. Because if you tell people, oh, there might be a ghost, drive a little bit slower, you know, you gave teenagers another reason not to drive super fast. They want to catch a ghost instead. I mean, it's a cautionary tale. I mean, that's definitely
that's a hell of a thought. I haven't considered that, but it could just all be like parenting lies.
There's a lot of them, man. I mean, you see that with a lot of the Native American stuff. I mean,
yeah,
why have we never
fucking
tried
Wendigo stories?
Yeah, why have we never
Cautionary
like, flipped that
tales
to a modern lens? You know, with a lot of these, like even like the railroad crossing spots. Like, I mean, you tell kids, oh, there's a ghost in that area because somebody got hit by the damn train. Then kids aren't going to play on the tracks in that area anymore. I mean,
hell, no, I think you're onto something there. I mean, that's a pretty good idea.
Or it takes one event and then you just use the event as a basis of the story and then you create it from there. Like I was kind of, maybe we're both right in the same context here. You know, the one guy was right that that's the root of it, but the story was played telephone to, again, do something about this area.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think you're totally onto something. And I did not even consider that. But anyway, they straightened out this section of the road. In the years since, they've also constructed a new railroad underpass bridge. And the new bridge is located like 75 feet east of the original. And the original bridge. Excuse me?
Is it called Ghost Girl Bridge?
Well, funny enough, the original bridge is still there and it's now known as Lydia's Bridge.
Dang, I was close.
Yeah. And in recent years, I think probably within like the past 5 or 6 years, the town has built a walkway that leads from the road to the original bridge because like so many people still like visit this place and, you know, there's like graffiti on the bridge and people leave Ouija boards and things like that. So it's, you know, something of a local like tourist attraction.
Yeah, paranormal tourist attraction. These are awesome. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when they don't block them off and chain them off and tell people they can't go there. It's always better because most of them, they just chain off and tell people they can't go there.
And closing this section out, allegedly people are still seeing, you know, sightings of Lydia and reporting, you know, on dark and stormy nights, seeing this ghost on the side of the road, even though the bridge has moved.
How far is this from your house? Because the next time it's raining,
like an hour and a half.
Oh, damn, that's too far. Well, the next day that you know it's going to rain, You got to go and try this one out. See if you and Jenny can go on an adventure and see if you guys can catch the ghost girl. This ain't that far. Hour and a half. Next time it's raining, man,
we
pack
can
up
knock
your
it out
bags
in
and
an
go for a
afternoon
drive
if we wanted to. But no, we'll definitely probably try to stop by when we're passing through at some point, because like I said, it's not that far from where we live, and it's kind of like it's a little bit off like the main drag when you're like going through North Carolina. But yeah, I mean, definitely be worth checking out, I feel like.
Hey, if you ever end up going there, make sure you get some pictures of the bridge and we can post them on our social media pages and stuff, since our listeners will now know the story, so it'll be even cooler that way.
All right, so kind of closing us out tonight, my kind of take home point, final theories, conclusions, what have you. So there's, legends of phantom hitchhikers that have existed for centuries. They're found in the folklore of like several countries. Pretty much every state has these legends. North Carolina has at least 4 other phantom hitchhiker legends. This is just like the most popular one. But it's also widely considered to be like one of the most detailed phantom hitchhiker legends, like, period. And so, obviously, like we said, this has led a lot of researchers to believe that, the legend could at least be based on actual fact. And that's kind of where I fall on this. Longtime listeners will know I'm very skeptical that people are like actually seeing ghosts and like the ghost of their, Aunt Sally or some Civil War general or something like that. So I don't, necessarily think these people are seeing like the disembodied spirit of some young woman. But, talking about the thought forms and all of that, I think it's entirely possible that, first off, the event that inspired this legend probably did happen. It just, stands to reason. And 2, I think it's very possible that there's something, even weirder going on here. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with this one. Something a little bit different than I normally research, but it was kind of a fun one to put together. So do you have any kind of take home thoughts for this one, Shane?
Well, with a lot of the paranormal stuff, I feel like there's probably like a really simple answer to a lot of this stuff. And like I'm always talking about the whole like conspiracy of the paranormal. Like I think that there's some real world practical use to whatever this paranormal reality is, and that's why they kind of let everybody just kind of take liberties and do whatever they want with it. Like I feel like there's something scientific to it, like transferring of consciousness, like something. Like I don't think that all these people are dying and just kind of wandering the earth. Like I think that there's either something that's taking the slot, so to speak, kind of like we mentioned earlier, or if there is a possibility of this, maybe we're seeing like a shadow of something. Like I don't know. Like I feel like there's a lot more to this paranormal, a lot more scientific aspects of this paranormal stuff than what a lot of people are led into. And the reason why the paranormal has gotten so ridiculous is to like pull people away from it, because a lot of like, a lot of the analytical researchers, we tend to go towards like the UFO stuff. We tend to go towards the cryptid stuff. And it's not like we're taking stuff away from the paranormal. It's just with an analytical mind, you kind of tend to go more into that region. And maybe that's kind of the whole ploy, is that they want people with minds like that kind of staying over there because, maybe this paranormal stuff has a lot more of a simple answer than what a lot of us think it is. And everybody has all these different theories and all that, but it's just kind of muddy in the waters. Maybe it's something a lot more simple than that.
Well, 2 thoughts. I mean, we talk all the time about how all this stuff is connected, and the lines between cryptids and aliens and ghosts blur a whole lot if you just do a little bit of digging below the surface. And then number 2, how many times have we talked about the phenomenon, whatever that may be, ultra terrestrials, demons, Nephilim, whatever you want to call it, tricksters, elementals, wearing masks and presenting itself in different ways, and in ways largely that the experiencer expects it to present itself in. If you're in the woods, the phenomenon is going to present itself as a Bigfoot. If you're out in the desert, the phenomenon might present itself as a UFO or an alien coming down to abduct you. So if there's this,
that's kind of what I've always I don't know if other people call it that, but I've always kind of referred to this concept as like the others. So it's just like, it's single,
exactly.
like all these weird things we're experiencing are simply one other thing other than us.
And if there's this, already built in cultural legend and framework, for lack of a better term, it kind of makes sense to me that, whatever the others or the phenomenon is would latch onto that and present itself as this thing that people expect to see on dark and stormy nights when they're driving down High Point Road. So I think
I
that's
mean,
a great thought.
the whole woman in white thing has transferred, like I said, from rivers with a lot of old Native American tales, seeing these white women all dressed in white, to roads. So there's either two ways you can look at it. Either one, it's a really popular story that just ends up getting transferred and telephoned through time, or two, there's something to it, and that's why you see this legend everywhere. It doesn't matter the continent, doesn't matter what corner of the world, you see this legend reoccurring. And like I said, maybe it's because there's something to it, or it's because the story's so good. But I tend to kind of gear towards things aren't always a coincidence. Like at least some of these, if there's a million cases of this, there's at least got to be something to a handful of them, which proves that there is something going on. And not to mention, again, it seems like, as we're always talking about, the phenomenon changing itself and kind of doing these slight variations. Same stories from water to river. It just changed as time has progressed and we've moved into the modern age. But you're seeing it realistically in the same thing, the road most traveled by people. So maybe I think there's something to it personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one, always a nugget of truth, and two, more than one thing can be true at the same time. So, Shane, unless you got anything else, why don't you tell all of our listeners how they can get up with us if they want to get in touch with us for any reason?
First and foremost, you guys can email us at bizarreencounters@outlook.com, or you guys can get a hold of us through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the two that we're the most active on. Always posting clips over there if you guys want to check out clips from the show too. You guys can also go and get a hold of us through the submission form, which is available up at the top of our link tree. And the last way you guys can get a hold of us is through our hotline. You guys can call or text that 24/7, and hopefully even call in with some of your experiences that you might like to share for Halloween. And that number is 313-364-1551. And again, if you happen to miss that, it is available down in the show notes.
And you guys be sure to show some love to our friends and sponsors of the show. We got our buddies Rick and Hans with I Know Squatch for all your squatchy gear needs. We've got our buddy Dave, aka the Snarly Yow, with Snarly Yow Natural Products. And we got our buddy Joe with Crypto Theology for all your wearable cryptids.
And if you guys got some free time, don't forget to check out our awesome friends with affiliate links, Dimension Devices, and Stickermule, with some additional discounts and credits available for you guys. More information on that is available down in the show notes.
And as always, all the shit we've mentioned is in the link tree in the show description.
And just like the continuous legend of the woman in white and the hitchhiking ghost, we always stay bizarre. You guys should stay bizarre. So guys, always, always remember to always stay bizarre. Bizarre. Bizarre.
I ain't afraid of no ghosts.
You shut up! I'm so fucking scared right now.